Rain poured over the cracked streets of a quiet Oregon town, turning the dust into tiny rivers that ran along the sidewalks. Cars hissed past, their headlights reflecting off wet pavement. And there, standing in front of a small grocery store, was an elderly woman clutching her thin coat tighter around her frail body. Her name was Irene Mitchell, 76 years old, with silver hair pulled back into a bun and eyes that still carried the warmth of someone who hadn't given up on kindness, even when life had nearly given up on her. The night had been long. Irene had walked 3 blocks from her apartment after realizing her pantry held nothing but half a jar of peanut butter and a few crackers. Her monthly check wasn't due for another week, and she had exactly $10 left to her name, a $10 bill she had folded neatly in her pocket, planning to buy a loaf of bread, some soup, and maybe a small carton of milk. But fate, as it often does, had other plans. As Irene approached the grocery store's sliding doors, she noticed something unusual by the side of the building. A large motorcycle leaned against the wall, rain dripping off its chrome frame. Next to it sat a man slumped on the ground, one leg stretched awkwardly, his leather jacket drenched and his face pale under the streetlight. His beard was thick, his arms covered in faded tattoos, and across his back, the emblem of a well-known motorcycle club, Hell's Angels. For a moment, Irene froze. She'd seen the name on TV before, the kind of men people warned others about. Rough. Dangerous. Outlaws. The kind of people polite society avoided. But then, the man coughed, a deep, painful sound that echoed off the brick wall. His hand was clutching his stomach, and his breathing sounded uneven. Without thinking, Irene's instinct to help overpowered her fear. She hurried over, her shoes splashing through the puddles. "Sir," she asked softly, bending down beside him. "Are you all right?" The man lifted his head, blinking through the rain. His eyes, piercing blue beneath the shadows, softened slightly when he saw her. "Ran out of gas," he mumbled. "And guess I ran out of luck too." "Do you need help?" she asked. He chuckled weakly. "Don't think the police or anyone would want to give me a hand, lady. You should probably just go on." But Irene didn't move. "Nonsense," she said gently. "No one deserves to sit out here in the rain." The man's bike was heavy, his body heavier, but Irene insisted on helping. She guided him under the grocery store awning, where at least the rain couldn't reach him. She noticed a gash on his arm that was bleeding through his sleeve. "You're hurt," she said. "It's nothing," he grunted. "Took a fall earlier. I'll be fine once I get home." "Where is home?" He hesitated. "Couple towns over. But I ain't getting there tonight." That's when Irene looked at the $10 bill still clutched in her palm. It was all she had, but as she stared at the shivering man before her, she realized that bread and soup could wait another day, but this man might not have another night. She turned toward the gas station across the street. "Wait here," she told him. 10 minutes later, Irene returned, soaked from head to toe, holding a small red gas can. The attendant had filled it just enough for $10, her entire remaining money. She handed it to him without a second thought. The man blinked, stunned. "You bought me gas." "I did," Irene said simply. "Now you can get home safely." He looked down, his jaw tightening. "Why would you do that for me? You don't even know me." "Because," Irene replied softly, "someone once helped me when they didn't have to. Maybe it's time I returned the favor." The man sat in silence for a moment before his expression changed, something in his hardened face cracked, like a wall that had finally given in. He reached into his pocket, pulling out a small, worn patch with an embroidered red wing on it. "Keep this," he said. "It means something." Irene looked confused. "What is it?" "Just a token," he said, smirking faintly. "Let's call it a thank you, ma'am." Before she could argue, he rose unsteadily to his feet, fueled up his bike, and gave her a nod. The engine roared to life, echoing through the empty parking lot. He lifted his hand in salute and rode off into the rain, taillight fading into the night. Irene stood there for a long while, clutching the little patch. She didn't know what it meant, or if she'd ever see that man again. All she knew was that she was now completely broke, and yet, somehow, she didn't feel poor at all. The next morning, Irene woke to the sound of distant engines rumbling. At first, she thought she was dreaming. The noise grew louder, echoing down the narrow street outside her small, weathered home. When she peeked through the blinds, her heart nearly stopped. A long line of motorcycles, dozens of them, stretched as far as she could see. The riders, wearing leather jackets and dark helmets, pulled up in front of her house, engines idling in unison. Neighbors peeked through windows, whispering nervously. The sound was thunderous, like a storm of steel and chrome. Irene stepped outside slowly, gripping her coat, unsure what was happening. Then, from the front of the line, a tall man dismounted. When he removed his helmet, she recognized the same piercing blue eyes, the man she had helped the night before. He smiled, this time standing firm and strong. "Morning, ma'am," he said, his voice steady. "Hope I didn't scare you." What is this?" Irene stammered. "This," he said, gesturing toward the other riders, "is a thank you." The other bikers, one by one, took off their helmets. Some were rough-looking men with beards and tattoos, others older, calmer, but every single one looked at Irene with respect. Then, behind them, a large truck pulled up. The tarp was lifted, revealing what looked like a brand-new roof's worth of lumber, paint cans, and tools. "I told the guys what you did," the biker said, stepping closer. "You gave your last $10 to help a stranger, a guy who didn't look like he deserved it. That don't happen often, ma'am. So we figured it's time someone helped you." Irene's eyes widened, tears forming instantly. "Oh, dear heavens. We're gonna fix up this place," he continued. "New roof, new porch, some paint. You deserve better than what you've been living with." Irene tried to speak, but her voice broke. "You don't need to do that. I didn't do it for a reward." He nodded. "That's exactly why you deserve one." For a moment, silence hung in the air, broken only by the sound of engines cooling. Then, one by one, the bikers began unloading supplies. Some carried ladders, others hauled wood. A few waved at Irene as they passed, grinning. The man she had helped the night before, whose name she would soon learn was Jace, stayed by her side, explaining what they planned to do. "Your neighbor told us your roof leaks," he said. "We're fixing that first." And the porch steps, one of the guys almost tripped coming up. Irene's hand trembled as she covered her mouth. "I don't know how to thank you all." "You already did," Jace said quietly. That day, the quiet little neighborhood witnessed something few would believe if they hadn't seen it themselves, a swarm of Hell's Angels working together to rebuild an old woman's home. Children peeked from porches, astonished. Some of the men painted, others hammered nails, while a few ran to grab coffee and sandwiches for everyone. The once silent street came alive with laughter, the thud of hammers, and the roar of motorcycles echoing now like a song of redemption. And through it all, Irene sat on her porch chair, a worn-out wooden seat that Jace later promised to replace, watching with disbelief and joy as her life transformed in front of her eyes. Hours passed, and as the sun began to dip, she looked at Jace again. "You didn't have to do this," she said. "I just wanted to help." He smiled faintly. "And you did. You helped more than you know." But Irene didn't yet understand what he meant. She didn't know the truth behind the man she had met that night, the pain he carried, the guilt that had haunted him for years. She didn't know that her small act of kindness had not only changed her life, but had saved his. As dusk settled over the neighborhood and the motorcycles lined up again, Irene's little house looked brighter, stronger, alive. She stood on her porch, surrounded by men who the world often misunderstood, and for the first time in a long while, she felt safe. But Jace wasn't done yet. He had one more surprise, one that would make Irene's knees go weak and her heart overflow. He reached into his jacket, pulled out an envelope, and handed it to her. "From all of us," he said. "You might want to sit down for this." Irene frowned, confused, but took it. Inside was a piece of paper, a check with her name on it. She gasped softly. Her hands trembled as she read the amount. The crowd of riders stood silently, waiting for her reaction. Irene looked up at Jace, her eyes glistening. This can't be right." "Oh, it's right," Jace said with a grin. "That's just the start." Irene's voice trembled as she looked at the check again, her wrinkled fingers tracing the numbers in disbelief. It wasn't a small donation, it was $10,000. More money than she'd seen in decades. Her knees felt weak, and she had to grip the porch railing just to steady herself. "Jace," she whispered, barely getting the words out. "This can't be real. I can't take this. I can't accept so much money." But Jace shook his head. "You already did more for me than anyone else ever has. You didn't look at the patch on my jacket or the scars on my arms. You just saw a person who needed help. That's worth more than money, ma'am." He turned to the other riders, who stood silently, their faces softened by the moment. The boys all chipped in. "Some of us don't have much, but we figured if you could give your last $10, the least we could do was return the favor, with interest." Tears welled in Irene's eyes. Her voice cracked. "I don't deserve this." Jace stepped forward and placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You deserve more than this. You reminded all of us, that good people still exist. You see, before last night, I'd lost faith in that." The crowd shifted slightly, and Irene noticed how the other bikers looked at Jace, not just with respect, but with something deeper. Pride. Gratitude. Almost as if they were watching a man who had found his way back from a dark place. Jace looked down for a moment, his voice growing quieter. "I wasn't supposed to be on that road last night. I'd just come from my brother's grave. He died last year, overdose. I kept blaming myself for not being there for him. I was drinking too much, fighting too much, and I just didn't care anymore." Irene listened, her heart tightening as his voice cracked slightly. "I stopped at that store because I was ready to give up," he continued. "And then you showed up. Some old lady in a raincoat, talking to a man you should have run from. You didn't ask who I was or what I'd done. You just helped. That night, you saved my life, ma'am." Irene's tears spilled freely now, her frail shoulders shaking. "Oh, Jace." He smiled faintly, brushing the back of his neck. "So, this isn't charity. This is payback, from a man who got a second chance because of you." The bikers around them nodded. One of them, a big man with a gray beard, spoke up. "Ma'am, you made a believer out of him. And that's no small miracle." Laughter rippled through the group, soft and genuine. Jace turned toward the truck again. "And we've got one more thing for you." From the back of the truck, two riders rolled out a small, red motorized scooter, shiny and new, with a little basket on the front and a ribbon tied around the handlebars. Irene gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. "Oh, my goodness." Jace grinned. "Your neighbor said you've been walking everywhere. Figured this might make life a little easier. You can take it to the store, to church, wherever you want to go. Consider it your new ride, part of the family fleet." The crowd chuckled, and Irene laughed through her tears. "You boys are too much. I don't know how to thank you." "You already did," Jace said again, smiling softly. The day went on with laughter and warmth. Irene insisted on making coffee for everyone, though her kitchen was small and her mugs mismatched. The bikers sat in her yard, sharing stories, sipping coffee from chipped cups, and talking like old friends. At one point, Irene disappeared into her bedroom and returned with a small wooden box. Inside was the patch Jace had given her the night before, the one with the red wing. She held it out to him. "You might want this back," she said kindly. But Jace shook his head. "No, ma'am. That's yours. That patch means a brotherhood, loyalty, respect. Last night, you showed more of both than most of us ever have. You keep it. You're family now." Irene smiled through tears, her fingers clutching the patch tightly. "Family," she repeated softly, as if trying to believe it. As the sun began to set, the rumble of engines filled the air again. One by one, the bikers packed up their tools, gave her hugs, and promised to visit. Some left small gifts on her porch, a blanket, a grocery bag, a bouquet of daisies someone must have bought on the way. Jace was the last to mount his bike. Before he left, he turned back to her. "You take care of yourself, all right?" "I will," Irene said. "And you, don't you lose that heart of yours again." He smiled. "Too late. You already fixed it." With that, he revved his engine, raised his hand in salute, and rode off, the others following behind him. 50 engines roaring down the narrow street, the sound fading like distant thunder until all that was left was the quiet hum of evening. Irene stood on her porch for a long time, watching until the last taillight disappeared over the hill. She looked at her house, fresh paint, repaired porch, a new roof gleaming in the twilight. The air smelled of sawdust and rain. And in her hand, the little patch glowed softly in the fading light. Weeks passed. Life in the small Oregon town returned to normal, though for Irene, nothing was the same. People who once walked past her without noticing now stopped to chat. Strangers dropped by just to see the biker's house. She had new friends, new hope, and even a little scooter she rode proudly down the street, waving at children who giggled as she passed. One afternoon, she received a letter in the mail. It was handwritten, the envelope smudged with fingerprints and sealed with a red wing sticker. She opened it carefully and began to read. "Dear Miss Irene. Just wanted to let you know we made it back safe. The boys still talk about you every week. We even started something new, a charity ride in your honor. We call it the $10 Run. Every year, we ride across towns, giving back to people who need help, no questions asked. We tell your story, about how one act of kindness changed a whole lot of lives. Thought you should know that you started something bigger than you realize. With love. Jace and the brothers." Tears blurred Irene's vision as she finished reading. She held the letter close to her chest and whispered softly, "Oh, my dear boy." Later that evening, she hung the red wing patch above her kitchen table, next to the letter. It became her little shrine, a reminder that kindness always comes back around, sometimes with the roar of 100 engines. And every year after that, when the sound of motorcycles echoed through town, people would rush outside to watch the riders pass, 50 bikes gleaming under the sun, carrying banners that read, "The $10 Run," in honor of Irene Mitchell. And somewhere near the front of the line, Jace would always look toward her house, smiling as he passed, remembering the night a fragile old woman gave her last $10 to a stranger, and in doing so, gave him back his life. The story of Irene spread far beyond their little town, shared online, retold by reporters, even covered by local news. People from across the country wrote to her, sending letters, flowers, and messages of gratitude. They said her story made them believe in good again. And every time someone asked her why she'd done it, why she helped a stranger when she had nothing left, Irene would smile and say, "Because when you have kindness in your heart, you always have something to give." On her porch, she often sat in the evenings, sipping tea and listening to the distant rumble of motorcycles somewhere down the highway. It was her favorite sound now, not of noise, but of hope, gratitude, and the circle of compassion that would forever link her to a group of men society never understood. A few months later, a local reporter asked her what she thought about the fact that her story had gone viral. Irene laughed softly, brushing a strand of silver hair behind her ear. "I didn't do anything special," she said. "I just gave what I had. The world would be a lot better if more people stopped counting what they give and started giving what they can. And as the reporter packed up and left, Irene glanced again at the patch on her wall. The small red wing shimmered slightly in the afternoon sun. It reminded her of the night she thought she'd lost everything, and instead found a family, a purpose, and a legacy that would live far beyond her years. Because sometimes, the smallest acts of kindness, even one $10 bill, can set in motion a miracle big enough to change lives forever. And that, as the townsfolk often said whenever they told the story, was how one elderly woman's last $10 became the start of something extraordinary, the day the Hells Angels became angels for real.